I often remind my martial arts students that a black belt is nothing more than the master of the basics. In fact, if you take a look at anyone who has achieved a mastery level in anything in life, in their profession, in athletics, in relationships, in life, it's because they learned how to master the basics. Hi everyone, Chris Natzke here with Black Belt Leadership Speaking and Coaching with your Mind of a Champion tip of the week. Basics. I remember one of my very first martial art classes, my first instructor telling me about the importance of mastering basics. In fact, the example he used is he said, if you built your house on sand, it would wash away at the first sign of harsh weather. But if you built it on cement, if you built it on blocks, on a strong foundation, like foundational basics, it would last through any weather. See, in our life we oftentimes make much more complicated than it is, in my opinion. I think that when we adhere to the basic practices that we know are going to get us results, but we do them consistently, that's when we can achieve mastery. I love this story in a book that I read called Raise Your Game by Alan Stein Jr. He talks about the first time that he ever met up with Kobe Bryant. Stein had been doing some consulting work with the Lakers, and he asked Kobe if he could watch him work out. And Kobe said, absolutely, meet me at 4:30. Well, Stein knew that the team was going to be having a meeting that day, a team meeting later that day at 5 o'clock. And he told Kobe, he said, well, you've got a meeting at 5. How can you work out at 4:30? And Kobe smiled at him and he said, tomorrow, 4:30 a.m. So at 4:30 a.m., Stein found himself watching the greatest basketball player of the planet at that time practicing. But when he was watching him during his entire 60-minute workout, the only thing he did was practice his basics. Basic footwork, basic dribbling, basic shooting. And at the end, he approached Kobe and he said, man, how is it I watch you for a whole hour and all you did was practice the basics? How is the best player on the planet? Why is it that's all they do? And Kobe smiled at him again and he said, how do you think I became the best player on the planet? I never got bored with the basics. So what does that mean in our lives? We may not be a martial art master, we may not be an elite athlete, but I know that we can all practice basic things in our lives that bring us positive results. And I'm going to share with you three in this first part of a two-part series of three of the most important aspects I think that we need to master in terms of basics in our lives and in our business. The first one is rest. Can't believe I started with that one, right? I didn't even get out of the gates. But the reason I start with it is it's probably the most difficult one for me. You know, getting adequate rest, like getting proper rest during the evening, 7 to 8 hours a night. Also allowing our brains and our minds and our bodies to rest after strong activity. That was never anything that was second nature for me. I was always about going, and oftentimes still am, unless I catch myself. But several years ago, I was getting ready to test at the time for my 6th degree black belt. This was back in 2000. And I started to really feel weary. I couldn't get my energy up for my workouts. And I was about 6 weeks away from my testing. And I went to my homeopath at the time, my good buddy, the late Dr. Gil Greiner. And I was telling him about how I wasn't feeling well. And he challenged me to dramatically roll back my workout routines and start getting adequate rest, which of course I totally pushed back on until finally he looked me dead in the eye and he said, Chris, you need to remember that rest is part of your training. Rest is part of your training. So are you adequately resting? Are you getting great sleep at night? Are you getting quality sleep at night? Are you also making sure that you're resting and recovering? Because constantly driving and constantly pushing, oftentimes over time, almost every time over time, will start to hold us back. So where do you have an opportunity to rest? Number 2 is nutrition. Ooh, the dreaded talk about diet. I know when I used to have my martial arts studio and I would help people with weight release, this was probably the most sensitive conversation that I would ever have with anyone. In fact, several years ago, I was getting ready to go on stage with one of my good buddies. We were asked to do a dual presentation in front of a men's group to talk about men's fitness. And we were meeting beforehand and we were talking about what we're going to share. And I can't remember who said it first, but basically we both came up with, yeah, we talk so much about exercise and that's what we've devoted our lives to, but really probably the most important thing is nutrition if somebody wants to release weight. Ouch, right? But you see, so many of us have an opportunity to really up-level our nutrition. In fact, there's so much information out there, there's really no excuse anymore. It becomes a choice. So if you have an opportunity to up-level your basics in terms of nutrition, get on it because it's one of the most powerful things you can do. And then number 3, movement. Movement. Note that I didn't say exercise, and it's not that I don't enjoy vigorous exercise. In fact, later on today, I'm planning to do a heavy kicking martial art workout, and I love that expression of my body. But many of us get caught up in the sedentary lifestyle that we have behind computers, and we just don't move our bodies, which were designed to do that. That's how we stay healthy. And in fact, if you've never heard about it before, there are places on the planet called blue zones. They're in different pockets. I know that there's one off the coast of Okinawa. And basically what they have found in these blue zones is that people live routinely into their 90s and into their 100s. And when they took a look at what's happening, they of course did have healthy diets and they were part of a community and they still had a purpose that they were living in their life. But the one thing they did each and every day is they moved. They walked, they squatted, they lifted, they planted, they worked in the garden. So it was nothing elaborate, but it was constantly moving their bodies. So where do you have an opportunity to possibly up-level that basic in your life? So that's what I have for you today, my friends. Next week, what we're going to be doing is looking at another 3 basic behaviors and basic strategies that I think are some of the key things we can do to move ahead. But this week, I challenge all of you, whether it's choosing all 3 of these that we just covered or just choosing one, where do you have an opportunity to up-level your basics? Because maybe, just maybe, you might become a black belt in one of the most important aspects, your life. This has been Chris Natzke with Black Belt Leadership Speaking and Coaching. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you next time on the Mind of a Champion Tip of the Week.